Welcome everybody, Mad Hatters, to another Edge of the Rabbit Hole. Tonight we have Paranormal Quest in the house. Ryan Zackrell, Jason McKinney. Coming up next. Welcome everybody to Edge of the Rabbit Hole. I'm Mike Ricksecker, author and ghost historian. With me as always, Vanessa Hogle, my co-hostess, and of course down there in the chat room, shenanigating the chat. That would be Shana Wankel. So thank you very much, our chat shenanigator. Up tonight, we have a fantastic couple of guys with us from Paranormal Quest, Ryan Zackrell and Jason McKinney. They've been investigating a long time, met out there. You guys are probably familiar with it, Moundsville. And they have a really, I love their channel, Paranormal Quest, very, very high quality paranormal investigation videos. So we're going to get into all that, all their experiences, evidence they've collected, places they've been, all of that. So Ryan and Jason, welcome.
Hey, thank you, Mike. Glad to be here.
Thanks for having us.
Yeah, absolutely happy to have you. I was really enjoying the conversation that you guys were having with Vanessa before we started the show, talking about Moundsville, because you guys are there, all the time.
Yeah.
And Vanessa had some really interesting experiences, even though it was a public hunt and she had some things she didn't like about some of the people that were there. She did have some interesting experiences there at Moundsville, but kind of talk about like the whole genesis of Paranormal Quest, where you guys started, and how it's, like I said, I really enjoy your videos and the high quality that you guys have. So how did this whole thing come to fruition?
Well, it's kind of interesting how you say that, because Moundsville, the West Virginia Penitentiary, is really how we all became a group. We all met at the West Virginia Penitentiary because at various points in our lives, we have all worked at the West Virginia Penitentiary as tour guides, maintenance staff, paranormal guides, you name it. We've all worked there. And actually, I met Jason in 2009, February of 2009 at the penitentiary. He had actually booked it for his own private group, and I was the guide that night, and I showed them around and investigated with them. And we've been friends ever since here, a decade later. And just 2 years ago, asked Jason to join Paranormal Quest as a full-time member of the group. But it really started, Paranormal Quest started with myself, Steve Hummel, and David Gear. And we had a passion. After meeting at the penitentiary, we decided that we had a passion for filmmaking as well as investigating the paranormal. And we wanted to combine both of those and create a project that we could say had a lot of integrity, and that we could kind of inject with our own style and just really enjoy creating. And, we've been doing it since the first time we filmed was September of 2010. So coming up here in September of 2020 will be 10 years of filming Paranormal Quest. And we've been doing it ever since. We've traveled many very historical, very haunted locations, and it really has been a really cool journey. And then, of course, in 2017, bringing Jason on board and meshing the way we did, it all kind of, came together. We work really well as a team, and it just works. We have a very strong friendship, a very strong bond between the four of us, and we love what we do. So, and from the investigating to the filming, all the way through to releasing the evidence in the episodes and seeing everybody's reaction on our YouTube page. So it is a lot of fun, and it's become, of course, a really long, steady passion of ours. So
let me ask you, since we were discussing Moundsville, and as much as you return there, obviously you like the location, and obviously that you're getting something back from the location, but do you feel like you have made almost friends or comrades of those in that location, especially in the area off of where they would eat? Do you know what I'm talking about? There's that room on the bottom floor where they have the tables, like where they would eat, those cells that go back in that particular area.
Oh, North Hall.
Yeah.
North Hall.
More or less establishing a relationship is what you're saying with the spirits.
Yeah.
I would say we kind of have. I mean, we feel, I'd say a lot of times. I know I feel a lot of times like I have. I'm sure, Dave, Steve, and Ryan, I mean, you guys have for sure. I mean, so sometimes it's interesting because when we're there working, maybe say we think, well, we'll see if we can get an answer. We'll try and talk to them a little bit. I mean, sometimes we get a response. Of course, never happens on key, but I know sometimes at least we kind of joke back and forth about, oh, they know it's just us, and they, it almost gets to a point where we think perhaps they're like, it's the guys again, and it just kind of blows us off,
I mean, it's funny that you say that, because it seems like every time before I go into work, which being a paranormal guide at the penitentiary, it's like I spend a lot of time walking through the areas by myself, especially before other coworkers get there. So, and I've walked through North Hall by myself many times, and it's almost every single time I go through North Hall, I will say, I'll talk to them. I'll say, hey guys, just to let you know, there's a group coming in. Hey, it's just me. And I'll even ask them, how are you guys doing tonight? There's a group coming in here. They're going to be trying to talk to you. If you can, if you're able to, if you have the energy, please speak up and please talk to them. Please communicate. And almost as though a reassurance, not that they need it, but, a familiar face, whether they recognize me or not, I don't know. But, I feel like if I were in the afterlife and I could have the ability to see a familiar face and respond to it, I'd like that reassurance from somebody that I recognize to say, hey, even though you don't know these people, they don't mean you any harm. It's okay to talk to them, And
for those that are buttheads during the investigations, you can mess with them a little bit.
There you go.
Okay. Take it and run with it.
Sometimes we go through, especially if there's people that have been there in the past, and that they weren't necessarily the kindest. They used a lot of provocation, or they say, hey, don't be afraid. Why don't you go in there and you just scare the crap out of them? So.
The one area we didn't get to go to was where the females were kept. And is that for a reason? Because I was really drawn there, but we were unable to go there. Is there a specific reason that they keep that away?
There may have been there were ladies for a while inside the main penitentiary. There would have only been a handful up in the warden's home for a while. They were trustees. Now, the prison, of course, I think they only had like around 100 at most up until 1947. But now they were actually kept separate from the men in a totally separate building. But unfortunately, that building, I think it was in the 1968 riot. It unfortunately sustained a lot of fire damage by the inmates, and so they had to tear it out by like the mid 70s. So there may have been a little bit of confusion on that as to perhaps that may have been, because I know an area that there was a certain amount of the population that was segregated, so to speak.
Back over by the wagon gate.
Back over. Well, that very well, that could have been OMC.
Yes. Yeah.
The OMC was Old Man's Colony. And now that was for inmates 65 years of age and older, typically with health problems. But it gave them a safer area to be housed away from the younger population who had more potential of doing harm to them or even taking advantage of them. But now I bet you that's probably what that was, because the OMC, it's actually up right by the North Gate. There was two of them, but ironically, they're both right there, one on either side.
Yeah, it just seemed to have women congregating in front of it.
Yeah,
so that's why I said.
Sorry, back in that back corner is where the women were.
Okay.
And where that building was, the DOC, the Division of Corrections and Rehabilitation for the state of West Virginia, they still use that area for training and for offices and things, and so they don't allow people back there just because that's their area. So,
okay, that makes sense. I just wanted to go where I was drawn and I couldn't. So.
We're the same way sometimes.
Yeah.
We hate it. It kills you.
Yep.
Yes, it does.
So I just want to let you guys know that David Gear is in the chat. It says, Dave's in the chat due to being a cog for the corporate world. So he's in there.
Hey, Dave.
We also have a couple other comments and questions. One is from both Shana and Katie Hopkins, say the same thing, that you guys need to come to the Mineral Springs in Alton for the Paracon. So I mean, June 1st. We'd love to have you out, of course. And then Judy Wilson asks, what do they want to find out about the paranormal? So it's Paranormal Quest. So what is the quest?
Do you want me to take it? You want to take it?
I'd say go ahead on that one.
Yeah, I'll go ahead on that
Both
one. It's interesting because when we first started Paranormal Quest, at least for me, and I can't speak for the other members, even though I really know what their mission is. I can't. We all have our own individual missions, but the quest really was to understand the paranormal a little bit better, just like everybody else does, and to look at it from a pretty objective standpoint on my end, not so much skepticism as objectivity, and to analyze the evidence and to help create a platform that we could display that evidence to the world that would be as well as informative, as well as entertaining. So that's where that came. Our whole main mission was to collect the evidence and then present it in a documentary film style format every single time we investigate. So and we will put anything out, no matter whether we catch something or not, we're making a documentary out of it.
Good.
Unless, tragedy strikes and we lose the footage. We've had a lot of that recently. We had a hard drive that ended up being damaged and we lost 2 investigations. So in those cases, we aren't able to release the investigation. So,
right.
But the whole mission statement has always been to help ourselves understand the paranormal a little bit better through that objective research, through gathering evidence and trying to analyze that evidence and comparing it to the history. We kind of threw around a few years ago the idea of having a slogan called History Resurrected, because that's really what the paranormal is. It is history that has happened in real life to real people people living these real experiences, and then having these experiences or having these moments be resurrected beyond life, beyond the grave, so to speak. For lack of a better word, I'll use that cliche. But that really, I think, is what it's all about, is, combining the history with the paranormal evidence, analyzing it objectively, and trying to help ourselves better understand the paranormal field, or rather the afterlife, or everything that goes along with it. And in doing so, helping others as well better understand it.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. I'm right there with you. We have a $2 super chat from Dustin Samario, by the way. So thank you very much, Dustin. Appreciate that. But yeah, I'm right there with you. Because that's a lot of what we talk about, here at Haunted Road Media, is that, these people's lives have essentially been lost to time. So resurrecting is a great word. We're helping them to be remembered today because they've been forgotten over all these years. So that's absolutely wonderful how you actually incorporate the history along with it.
Absolutely.
Also, in Moundsville, have y'all? I apologize, I haven't seen your videos yet, so I'm going to be hooking myself up and watching. Okay.
Hey, we appreciate
it. In Moundsville, y'all, you have a lot of people that didn't deserve to be there.
Yeah.
And I was a lot that were there based on color of their skin and being poor, unfortunately. Have y'all run into any evidence that would support that in any of the footage that you've ever gotten? Have any claimed innocence?
I'm trying to think back. We've done so many investigations at the penitentiary. It's tough to remember all the evidence that we capture off the top of our heads. I mean, I not just in the filming, but just investigating as a whole, I would say, yeah, we've come across what seems to be spirits claiming innocence, had voices come through the spirit box claiming innocence, and, even more notable inmates who had that there was speculation about their innocence, whether or not they had actually been guilty of the crime that they'd been accused and convicted of. So, but off the top of my head, giving you a detailed example, I can't think of anything. Can you, Jason?
Not right off. It'd almost be more of an instance where could almost recall some, not necessarily admissions of guilt, but something that'd be more along the lines of a guilty conscience type thing. For instance, there's been EVPs picked up of threats, things like that. your EVP, which was technically seemed like it was in the context of a conversation, perhaps, excuse me, of your experience in the infirmary where you captured a voice that said, "I told you not to make a move."
Oh, yeah. That particular EVP was back in 2009 before we started filming with Paranormal Quest, and I was up there with a different friend of mine who has since stopped investigating the paranormal. He was, we were both sitting up in the SPU, which was the Special Programs Unit, which is the psychiatric unit. Most of the suicide watcher inmates exhibiting strange and unusual behavior would be placed in this unit of the penitentiary. And so we were sitting up there and we were conducting an EVP session. Fairly chill moment up until this piece of evidence presented itself. It wasn't as though we were feeling or we were being aggressive or we were asking vigorous questions. We were just laying out questions, waiting about 30 seconds as you normally would in an EVP session. And it sounded like all of a sudden, out of the blue, caught us completely off guard. I mean, startled us completely. It sounded like somebody fired off a shotgun.
No, we heard the same thing.
Really?
Yes. Holy shit.
Same area, the psych ward?
Yes.
Oh, wow.
And we heard it when you're standing in the hallway looking into the larger room. Mm-hmm. It was in that corner in the right-hand side corner before you would go into the next hallway. Do you know where I'm talking about?
Excuse me. Sorry, could you say that one more time?
If you're okay, there was the rooms that looked like they had the medical or gynecological chairs in it. Okay, yeah. They were in that hallway. Then there was a larger room, and then there was another hallway. If I'm remembering correctly, because this has been a cool minute, and I'm an old lady. Okay, so just bear with me. But it was in the far right-hand corner, of the room before the hallway, before the second hallway, and it was loud.
That is exactly where I was sitting when we heard you capture that. No joke, that is exactly where both myself and my friend were sitting whenever we heard that.
Yeah.
Well, then, would you say that's a residual haunt?
I mean, that was always my idea behind whenever I analyzed it, but see, we caught an EVP afterwards, and it sounds like the EVP says, "I told you not to make a move." So when we capture it, it sounds like a gunshot, followed by, you can hear it almost sounds like a shotgun shell hitting the floor. Mm-hmm. Yep. And then you hear a man's voice, and he says, "I told you not to make a move."
The guard. Mm-hmm.
Yep.
As if it was a guard resorting to using his firearm on one of the inmates. And that would be something that would be very residual, because that happened frequently at the penitentiary, that the officers would use their weapons. So to have a residual.
It was about 2 a.m.
It was 1:30. Or so. It was just after 1:30 whenever we heard it back in 2000.
So pretty close around at the same time. Nice. Yeah. Nice.
That does sound residual. Yeah. And a lot of the activity in the infirmary does seem, you almost seem to have a little bit more residual. I would say, would you agree that there almost seems to be a little more residual than intelligent for the most part?
Yeah.
Because you get a lot of
the emotion.
Things.
Yeah, due to the emotion, that makes a ton of sense. Because that was one of the areas that I got taken off in again, and they kind of had to run after me and bring me back. And it makes a lot of sense to me, because there was just unbelievable sadness up there and feelings of aloneness and despair and pain. Lots and lots of pain, especially in the room that has a broken down bathtub in it. Bad.
Yeah. Just off of that long hallway.
Yes.
Yeah, that end of the hallway, there was a few years back. This was actually during the filming of one of the episodes, which was kind of creepy. We caught I don't know whether it would be sinister or we caught it and heard and caught a disembodied voice that was referencing rape up there in that same hallway a couple of years back. Now, there has been reported cases of, in the history of the prison, not only inmates being taken up there during the riots to that infirmary. We did some research and actually found reports when the riots kicked off, they would take inmates that they thought to be deserving of sexual assault, and they took them up there into the infirmary, and that is where they would violate them and rape them. And so
you're absolutely correct. Yeah.
So and so that was kind of interesting, having that strange voice that we captured and heard with, and Dave Gear heard with his ears, and we captured it, having that validated with that history, which was kind of strange, but also really, really interesting. So, but yeah, that whole floor up there, that I would say that's probably one of the most active places in the penitentiary, a mix of both residual and intelligent hauntings. And it's probably one of the oldest parts of the prison too, because before it was a hospital, it was the upper tier of the original South Hall cell block. So, which that cell block was completely torn out, and South Hall is actually where they had the death row cells. So that whole area, contact visitation, that shadow man hallway, the classrooms, the workshops, the infirmary, all of that used to be a cell block at one point, and that's where the people who were sentenced to die at the hands of the state by execution were kept until their execution date, roundabouts, before they were moved over to the death house where they were going to be executed. So
it's awful.
Yeah,
it was bad.
Well, hey, we have you're fine. We have a couple of super chats down in here from Joe Chandler. She says, in honor of Vanessa finishing her book and Chuck getting his degree. Congratulations, guys. So, yep, book 4. And then there was also a $5 super chat from Katie Palmer. She says, love you all. So I'll have to go back and see if there are some more questions after that, but there are a couple before. So one is, this is from Shana, our chat Shananigator. What is your favorite piece of equipment and least favorite pieces of equipment to use, and why?
That's a good question.
Yeah, I'll let Jason talk a little bit. I feel like I've been bogarting the time a little bit.
You're good.
That's a good question. You know, honestly, as far as personally, I could say a favorite piece of equipment, but realistically speaking, I would say, I guess if I had to pick a favorite, it would just be what we all have, which is just first, without being too simple, just your own senses. First and
awesome.
Foremost,
yep.
In the sense that, hey, it's free and but it's just
Free's
like,
good.
as comical as it is, like I said, I'm not trying to be too blasé, but for instance, how when you experience something, your gut instinct, as soon as it happens, whether it's more of an alarming thing, startling, or if you feel threatened or intimidated or frightened, it seems like maybe that can kind of help send you in the right direction in terms of, okay, is this something malevolent, something I should be worried about, something that, if that makes sense, your gut instinct as soon as something happens. But as far as electronic piece of equipment or just otherwise, actual equipment, I would say, honestly, probably a video camera audio.
Mm-hmm.
Least favorite would be, real quickly, I would say maybe dowsing rods, just because I'm no good with them, because I shake my back.
Right.
I can't use them either because they just point right back on me.
Nice.
Yeah, they just spin around and choke.
If you ever happen to lose yourself, you could always find yourself with some dowsing rods.
Yeah.
There you go.
I should walk around with a name tag that's upside down just so I know who the fuck I am.
Let's see. And Megan Talbert was asking if or where your show was. And so I do have the link to their YouTube channel, or she was asking if you guys are on YouTube. And I do have the link to the YouTube channel down in the description of this video. So you guys can link there after this is done. So they do have a lot of great stuff. What's that?
Oh, sorry. Never mind. I see you.
Are you watching the chat?
Yeah. Sorry about that.
Oh, you're good. So Fran Molina was asking what, and I was going to ask you this to give us a preview, because I know you just came out with like your first episode of the Cold Case Hauntings. So what's that all about?
We had this idea. So we, over the winter, we were kind of brainstorming new ideas because for Paranormal Quest, we've had a very similar format. Even though we've changed and evolved and improved our format, it's always been pretty much the same with what we did, collecting the history of the buildings and then going in and, of course, do interviews and then conducting paranormal research, collecting evidence and then connecting it back, and just chronicling our journey through these places. And then we thought, well, what if instead of investigating locations, we looked more towards honing in on specific people who had passed? And then we started thinking about, well, what is one way that we could use it to bring to light new information that has not really been known or hasn't really been released in some way or fashion. So we thought, well, there's a lot of unsolved crimes. And the more we started looking into it, the more we started to realize how many unsolved murders there actually are out there. And we started to think, well, this is something that we can do because we can use our talents as paranormal investigators as well as our talents as filmmakers to go out and research and investigate these specific murders, these specific cases, and try and communicate with the victim who lost their life and to see if they might have some insight. And, we had some communication in the first episode. We featured in the first episode of Cold Case Hauntings. It is technically not a cold case. It's still an active investigation, but it is an unsolved murder. But it just kind of fell into our laps because just some connections, they're connected to someone in our group. And it ended up following a young man, 29-year-old man named Mark Lundell, who went missing back in March of 2018 and was missing for 36 days before they finally found his body in the Monongahela River down in Fairmont. Just in a park called Palatine Park in Fairmont, they found his body. Now, his family knew that he was missing and they knew there was something wrong, and there had been sightings of bodies in the river and a man floating downriver screaming for help. And but it is a really touching story because we interviewed two of Mark's sisters, and they tell their story of basically from the time he went missing, what it was like trying to find their brother and what it was like dealing with the fact knowing that their brother probably was deceased, that he was gone, and still to this day not having answers as to what happened to him fully, not knowing who actually took his life, not knowing what way how he actually ended up in the river. So it was definitely an emotional day because we filmed the whole thing over the span of a 1-day period, and it was a very emotional day. A lot of tears were shed during the interviews. A lot of tears were shed when we went to the locations where they saw him in the river, and during the investigation, a lot of tears were shed because there was genuine communication during that. And it'd be harder for me to describe it to you. It's easier for you to actually go and watch because we had specific questions that were answered. Crystal, his sister, heard his voice say her name through the PSB-11 spirit box. I mean, it was one of the clearest voices I've ever heard come through the PSB-11. And it very clearly said her name. And she said it was very clearly his voice. So, and then a few other responses as well that were just pretty cool. We didn't, of course you'll have to watch it. Just like anything, paranormal related, it's not, for sure it's not reliable. You can't, sorry, I lost my train.
Oh, you're good.
Awake for almost 35 hours straight.
Yeah, I don't know.
Oh, wow. that makes for a long day.
Yeah. I've been awake a long time. So, but anyway, yeah, it's hard to rely on paranormal evidence alone to solve that type of crime. So it
can open up the lines of communication, and I actually know of which I speak on this because I flew to New York to investigate the disappearance of Holly Ann Hughes, who was supposedly from the Cropsey case, who was supposedly kidnapped and presumed killed by Andre Rand. And so, I mean, I know of which you speak. You have to be careful of what you put out there, because you have to worry about libel, you have to worry about slander, You have to worry about all of that. So I get it. I completely understand. We disclosed everything we could without giving names of whom we spoke with. And
Yes.
our whole purpose was not to exonerate who we believe didn't do it, that they pinned it on, but to open up the lines of communication with the community in hopes of actually uncovering who was responsible for not only her disappearance, but many other children, young adults, and adults. So I get where you're coming from. That having been said, were you given any information through EVP or anything else that might lead you to believe you've got a lead on who was involved?
I wouldn't say it was through EVP, particularly because we couldn't, again, like you said, because of libel, we couldn't feature in the interview segments who Crystal, their sister, suspected had done it, because she had a whole list in her head of the people that she suspected were involved and did it. And there was some, I would say, validation when she asked those questions for certain names. But again, you can't release a video.
No, you can't, but there's two.
Right.
There's two.
But it was definitely very eye-opening for her. And you can see the moment that her eyes are opened, but we have to, of course, censor the names. We cut out parts of it, to make sure, but the whole story is there. You can tell that there is closure in the end.
It's very commendable that y'all are doing that.
So, well, thank you. Yeah, we feel like it's a way that we can use our talents and our skills and what we love to do to help other people who could use it, who need that help, who need that closure. So
absolutely.
So, I mean, there's so many things that I could say about that, because I've done a few different, probably about 15 of them, I guess, here, videos on like the Stephen Avery case and something and things like that. So, getting into those, true crime cases and, revealing perhaps something a little bit new. Yeah, I mean, like Vanessa said, it's very commendable that you're, giving back in such a way. And it is kind of risky, especially for something so new. So I guess, without getting into too many details, is there something that they're actually pursuing with that, or you said that there was closure, so are they just done with it?
It was more personal closure for her.
Okay.
I don't know as far as
the authorities.
The authorities go. I don't know that anything that there was any revelation that could lead them in the right direction. But it certainly helped her, because like they had stated in the interviews, it's a very tricky case, and they understand that just like everybody else. A lot of the people that are involved in this, a lot of the people that are being interviewed or that are suspected of being involved are unreliable sources because of heavy drug use. And there's not much that they can rely on as far as factual testimony from some of these individuals. So it is a very tricky case. But,
Well, like you said, it's still very recent too.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, it is very recent. Who knows?
Unfortunately, due to the water element, any substantial evidence would have disappeared, unfortunately.
Right.
So
Yeah, especially he was in there 36 days,
Exactly.
Oh.
So yeah, anything that would have been tangible that could have been used in a court of law would have been long gone.
Right. So, yep. And but the biggest thing, the biggest victory with that, I would say, is for his sisters, for them to feel like they got closure, for them to at least know that their brother is there with them, that he is just right there with them all the time whenever they want to talk to him, because all it took was for us to sit down at a table. Not even, we were in a hotel at a table. We brought some items that were relevant to him and his connection to his sisters, and we just said, "Mark, are you here?" And after about an hour or so, he started, about 45 minutes or so after, he started to come through, so I think it was very, it brought emotional closure for them to know at least that that he's there and that he is looking out for them and that he's talking to them, you know. So
that is, if I was there, I'd give y'all a big old hug, because that's what this should be. That's
right.
what it should be.
Absolutely. Hey, we have a $5 super chat from Chipper Terry, so thank you very much, Chipper Terry. Absolutely appreciate that.
Thank you.
So along that same vein with helping people, and I know you're very heavily involved West Virginia State Penitentiary. And we've seen some of these historic places, and I know that particular facility had some issues not too long ago with historic places having problems with funding, staying open, things like that. Like you guys came out to St. Joseph's Hospital. What was that, last year? And you know, and that's no longer accessible now, and that keeps happening to a lot of these different locations. So, do you guys do different things to help as far as, you know, you're doing it with the people, or you're doing it with the buildings as well?
Right. Yeah. You want to take this, or you?
As far as with the prison goes?
Yeah.
Just in general, I think he's talking about like the benefit of historical preservation with paranormal investigation.
Exactly. Yeah.
Oh, absolutely. Yes. Well, it's just like how Ryan was saying earlier. I mean, you know, when him and David Steve founded PQ years ago, I mean, it was about the history, you know, first. I mean, it's like I've always said, the way I see it is, it's really hard, unless you understand the history of a location, it's hard to attempt to understand the haunting. You know, how can you understand the mystery of something without knowing the history? I mean, another little blasé reference there, but, you know.
Aside from being a medium, Vanessa.
But no, absolutely. I mean, it's incredibly important, you know, because if you can't, you know, preserve the history and the location, then, I mean, then the haunting, that aspect of the history is essentially gone. I mean, you know, virtually. And it's just like, even during our time there at the St. Joseph's Hospital, and how you were telling us about you and Greg, about the original part of the hospital, I believe it was, that was torn down.
Right. Yeah. The original building's gone.
Right. You know, and how that's, you know, not only does it just upset, you know, people like all of us, but, you know, upsets the spirits, you know, and that's understandable, like you had said, you know.
And it comes back to building awareness, you know, and that's one thing that we like to do with Paranormal Quest. And I feel like, not that, you know, we believe that we create a lot of awareness of haunted locations through, but I mean, they do the same thing with paranormal television. You know, you look at all the places, these old buildings that, you know, started and had a little bit of an inkling of an idea that they were going to start doing paranormal investigations. And, you know, one of the major networks came in with a major television show, you know, and they investigated there, caught paranormal evidence, and now they're, you know, on the map, and paranormal investigators are going there, and they're paying money to investigate these places. And therefore that money can go back into the preservation historically of these locations. And, you know, so that's always been a goal for us as well, you know, on a much smaller scale than the major networks, of course, but just to investigate the locations and teach the history, as well as the hauntings, as well as what paranormal evidence we capture, to teach that to whoever watches our videos, so that they can, you know, spread the awareness as well of these locations and the history, and preserve that. Because
don't hold back too much on, because I've seen this even with our channel, that when that happens, when people watch those shows, they come out to YouTube looking for additional information. So they hit your videos looking for more information about these different locations, like, you know, some of the different West Virginia State Penitentiary shows. I mean, a number of the different shows have filmed out there, and somebody does a replay of that or what have you, and all of a sudden, boom, you start getting hits on those or other locations that you've been. Like Greg was just on Haunted Hospital, so I'm sure your St. Joe's Hospital or your St. Joe's Hospital video got more hits, because I know mine got a few more around right then. So yeah,
you're right about that, because we released our Bel Air House episode right around the same time as Paranormal Lockdown with Nick Groff.
There you go.
And Trina Weidman came out, and it's like we have that video, that episode blew up, you know, and it was because it had just been released on that platform on, I believe it was on TLC at the time, but you know, it had been released on that platform, and so many people watched it, and then they, like you said, go and investigate on YouTube, start looking for further information, and so they ended up hitting our video, and you know, so you're right about that.
Yeah. So don't downplay it too much. It's a real thing.
Right, and so yeah, but I believe there's a big role for the paranormal field in preserving history, and that's something that I try and convey to people who believe that the paranormal field is doing more harm than good, because there are a lot of people out there who believe that investigating the paranormal is silly, or it is just wrong, or, you know, and then they don't believe it does any good. And, you know, you can point towards things like this, like what we're talking about, how directly paranormal investigation is able to save buildings and save history and save structures, you know. So taking the entire evidence factor out of the equation, the paranormal field can save history.
Because it builds interest in that location. And I've seen other historic locations that struggle and struggle and struggle, yet they're closed-minded to the paranormal. And it's like, be a little more open-minded. You'll get some people in there, you know, charge them whatever to, you know, investigate in there, and you will save your building. It's
like the Bluebell in Guthrie. Can't do it no more. Can't do it. They won't let you.
Well,
you know, and I mean, let's face it, this brings in tourism. People hear about places like that. They want to come in. It brings in money, not just to that location, but to the community as well. And they're still shunning it because they don't believe in it. Well, here we are, folks, right here on Edge of the Rabbit Hole. I've never met these guys before in my life. And we had the exact same fucking experience at a location, months or years apart. Explain that shit to me. Message me privately. We'll chat. You don't.
This inbox is gonna blow up now.
Yep.
No more than normal, honey. No more than normal.
Hey, we have an interesting question from Bree Jones. This is it's interesting. It's almost like a question in reverse. Have you ever found a location that the spirits don't want to have preserved? They just want their story told and be done with it.
Huh.
It's an interesting question.
Yeah. It's a little different.
Yeah, that is interesting that we've personally come across. I would say probably we've come in contact over the years with entities inside the penitentiary that do not want to be there, that do not want to see that building saved, because, you know, you look at those types of locations, the ones that were used almost for a confining life circumstance when these individuals were alive, and then after death they feel that same confinement, I'm sure, you know. So the destruction of that building specifically for that particular spirit, not saying all, but some, that particular one might be cathartic, might bring some form of release. But you know, we've had certain feeling or certain people messages conveyed that I can't remember what location that was. I specifically remember a REM pod session where we said, do you want this house to be torn down, and it went off. But anyway, yeah, I feel like that is a real thing, you know, especially if they have bad memories of their life in that location. So,
and Moundsville is a perfect example of that. And for those who have never been, in the Wagon Gate, which is the area that they hung people, I remember the guide telling us of a particular situation where they went up the stairs to hang the fella. The rope broke. He hit the ground. They picked him up, took him back up the stairs, and restrung him up and hung him again until it worked. Y'all, that's a bad fucking memory. I don't care who you are and on what day. That's a bad memory. Okay? This is not good. This is not good for people. So when you're talking about those type of instances that happen in a location, I can completely understand how every single person that ever spent time in Moundsville prison would want it torn down. We don't, though.
That's right. Yeah, because, and you have the history of, you have the paranormal with that goes along with it. But, you know, Moundsville, the building does a lot of good for educational purposes, you know, to teach people how corrections has evolved over the years. You know, people go on we have about 30,000 people a year go through historical tours of the West Virginia Penitentiary to learn about what it was like to live there. And the same thing, if that history is destroyed, they can't learn about it anymore. And therefore, nobody, you know, those who did see it, those who did go on there, did go on the tour will know, but eventually that history will be lost. And so, yeah, that is very important. But yeah, anyway, that was kind of a tangent I went on there.
No, and we have to throw out there, if you go to West Virginia State Penitentiary to, as you said, you know, learn about how corrections has evolved, not too far away, it's on your shirt. You can check out how other things have evolved.
That's right.
At the Archive of the Afterlife.
Yes, Steve couldn't be here this evening.
Yeah.
But I wore this shirt to make sure that I remembered, or make sure that at least Mike reminded me. Thanks, Mike. To pitch Steve's Paranormal Museum while you're in town looking at the West Virginia Penitentiary touring. Make sure you check out the Archive of the Afterlife. It is a paranormal and oddities museum in Moundsville inside the old Sanford Elementary School. And he has many objects that are believed to be cursed, hold some form of energy, or are believed to be haunted. And if anything, very historic. One of his more recent ones he got was it was a wicker cooling casket that he has on display now that was from around the 1860s. They used to use these cooling caskets whenever a loved one would die while they were waiting, because transportation wasn't as fast back then. They had to wait for a doctor to get there to pronounce them dead. So they had to basically keep them on ice, which is where that term keep them on ice comes from. And, you know, they had to literally keep the body cool so that the decomposition didn't begin before the doctor could pronounce them dead. But it allowed air to circulate into it because it's made of wicker, and it cooled the body down. And then once they were pronounced dead, they'd go to a real casket. So it was reused. And families would reuse these wicker cooling caskets multiple times throughout their family's history. And he has one of them on display at the museum, as well as the cap to the electric chair that went with Old Sparky at the penitentiary. Right. He had that there as well, believed to be used in the execution of 9 individuals in the 1950s. And many artifacts and items that have been picked up by other groups on paranormal investigations, where they picked up energy or evidence off of it, and then they sent it to Steve. So that's always an option as well. If you have an item that you've come across in your years of investigating the paranormal, you don't want it anymore, it carries some energy, dark energy, you don't like it, Steve is more than willing to take it at the archive and give it a home where people can still see it. And he's been doing this since 2011, I want to say. 2011, 2012 is when he opened up the Archive of the Afterlife. So he's been doing it for about 8 years or so now. And it's a very worthwhile trip, and it's very inexpensive. So tickets to get into the archive are not very expensive. So he likes to make it accessible to everybody, so anybody can get in to see it.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting stuff in there. I've sent him a thing or two, and I found it funny when we were at St. Joe's together, and Greg was pointing out the bricks from the original hospital, and everybody's like, "No, only take one, Steve."
Yeah.
Now, Steve, you can only take one. Save some for everybody else, but he does collect the bricks.
He does, yeah.
Yeah.
Stone from the mausoleum looky thingy that sits on top of the Hellfire Caves in England.
Oh,
but
really?
Wow.
Yeah, but it wouldn't be big enough. But I'll bring something back from Ireland.
Well, on top of that too, with the archive, like Ryan said, where it's located in the old Sanford Center, old school, it's haunted as well. So you get a one-stop shop. You get the haunted museum, and you're in a haunted location while you're visiting.
Yeah, it was featured on My Ghost Story. So the show My Ghost Story, the Sanford Center was. So it has activity as well. And so it's the perfect place for Steve to put his museum, and that's where he has it right now. And Steve's the one that operates the overnight investigations out of the former Sanford School there now. So it has a lot of history as well. So if you get the chance, book an investigation at the penitentiary. The following night, you can book an investigation of the Archive of the Afterlife and Sanford School. So it's right there, all in the same city. So Moundsville, your one-stop shop for paranormal investigation.
There you go. There you go. Awesome.
Right.
We have a question here from Shana. What are your thoughts on child spirits? Do you think there's some type of para-nanny for orphans?
That's actually a really good question.
It's a good question. It's funny, but it's funny the way it's worded, but it's a good question.
I think that's Shauna.
There's actually, and I don't know if someone wants to go before me, but I have a really relevant piece of evidence that it relates directly to that question right there. So, I mean, if somebody wants to go before me and talking about this, that's fine, because I don't want to, like I said, bogart the time here.
No.
Okay. So, I just feel bad when I talk too much. So, we investigated back in 2012, 2013, a house in Moundsville. It was a private residence in Moundsville, and they had reported that they had had a slew of paranormal occurrences, that the family was being haunted by a dark shadow figure, as well as the spirit of a young child. And we had been doing a lot of interviews with the family, and they all felt pretty intimidated by the dark entity, which we didn't actually pick up on while we were there, but we did pick up on a very relevant Class A EVP from what we believe to be the same child they were experiencing. They called the child Sally whenever the children of the family would communicate or be talking to this entity, which they would just be talking to nothing, and the parents would walk up and the kids would say, I'm talking to Sally. And, well, what we did is this was how we actually created what we call our abandonment tactic, because we had too many people in the house. It was a contamination nightmare. Too many people had showed up on the investigation, and we just said, you know what, set up cameras, equipment, and let's all leave. Because we didn't want to be rude and say, you know, you all need to leave and let us stay. We just said, let's everybody leave. We set up everything, and about a minute after we walked out of that house and shut the door and locked it behind us, there was a very clear, crystal clear, I don't know whether it's an EVP or an AVP, because nobody was there to actually experience it, but I will say it has vocal tone, and it even has echo inside the house. It sounds like a little girl says, tell them what? And then you hear a older woman respond to her, and it sounds like she says, very clear, same thing, vocal tone, echo. She says, we don't do that.
Oh,
almost
wow.
like she's coaching the young child spirit not to talk to us, which was it's very strange that question came up, because as soon as you read that, Mike, I thought, that sounds exactly like that EVP that we caught at that private residence, you know, which that episode is called A Family Haunted. It's one of our older episodes. So I apologize for the quality of the production, but you can find that.
No apologies. We understand from older stuff. I mean,
it makes perfect sense. And let's take 2 seconds here to explain why. In so many of these homes, you have people watching shows that are always talking about how we're going to get them out of here. We're going to make them go away. You know, we can exorcise these spirits. Everybody running in all Billy Badass. What if they don't want to leave?
Right.
What if it's their home? What if they think that because if they communicate, that gives us some type of power over them to where we can force them out? That makes perfect sense to me. It should be like, you know, I mean, in my tone, I'd be like, dude, don't fucking say a word. They're going to make it go, you know? She was, of course, more mommy-like.
Yeah.
Good on her.
Yeah, and that was exactly why we were there, too. We were actually sent to this private residence by Chris Dedman, because the family had contacted him, and he said, I'll come down and I'll do a blessing and get rid of the activity, get rid of the spirits, if you capture something malevolent. And so it makes sense that, you know, the older mother-like figure, and as they had mentioned in the comments, the nanny-like figure would be coaching the young child not to respond, because, you know, that was literally the goal for what was going on there. If we captured something malevolent like the family was experiencing, you know, they were going to come in and do a blessing of the house and rid the house of that whatever energy or spirits were there. So it makes sense. What you just said makes perfect sense.
Thank you. I thought so too.
Yeah, I've had people ask before, you know, do you think that the spirits are able to see each other and interact with each other? And I've caught EVPs before that have said, you know, we shouldn't talk. You know, one spirit's, you know, talking to another. So you know, it seems to obviously be the case. I think we may not quite understand, you know, the hierarchy and how all that works, but you know, kind of, you know, from your example, you're right there where you see a, you know, mothering type figure to a child or some adult to a child. So that does apparently exist in that realm.
Yeah.
And it's interesting too, because we actually captured something similar to that at St. Joseph's.
Mm-hmm.
I believe it was on the second floor, maybe third floor. And it was during, speaking of abandonment, but it almost sounds like two voices going back and forth, EVP. And so, yeah, that's interesting. But I just thought of that.
Yeah, and it makes you wonder, is that something that is possible all the time? Can they communicate with each other all the time, or part of the time? And who can communicate with who? And, you know, why is it if they can hear each other all the time, we can only hear them part of the time? And, you know, it's just it raises more questions than answers, which the paranormal field generally does.
Right.
You know, can't see them all the time.
I've been in situations where I know that two spirits are communicating with each other, but I've also been in locations where the history of it is so layered that this layer might be aware of each other, but they're not aware of this layer, and this layer isn't aware of this layer. You know what I mean? So it just depends on. Yeah, it snatches in time, layers in time, and you know, to me, I find it baffling and fascinating, and I just want to know more. Mm-hmm. You know, so I'm just that gal.
Dive in head first.
Damn straight.
So we're getting down towards the end. I've been holding on to this question till toward the end because it's more of a fun question. This is from Leslie Fear.
Oh, my girl.
Yeah. She asked, does your team bring snacks while investigating? And I guess what would those snacks be?
Do we bring snacks? We do bring snacks. I mean, it really depends on the investigation and how busy we were with filming that day. But most of the time, what we will do is we will go out to dinner during the abandonment session, and we will pig out on enormous amounts of food.
We stock up for the night.
That's right. It's like, you know, we don't want to bring any food, especially because, you know, it's all food that needs to be hot and fresh. And, you know, we don't want to bring any of that back and eat it later. So, you know, it's all about quantity, the quantity of food that we put back. And
but be careful, because after that third bean burrito, that's a stomach you're hearing later on, not a demon.
Yeah, true story. True story. Do y'all use psychics at all?
We have in the past. We just, in general, with our investigations, we haven't had anybody that we know who is psychic who has been willing to come along with us. You know, it's one of those things. Of course, I'm sure if we looked hard enough, and but we do have people that are sensitive. You know, we have David's mother who took the Shadow Man photograph, Polly Gear. She doesn't investigate anymore. She doesn't like to communicate, simply because she's not comfortable anymore with communicating with the spirit realm. But she is very in tune and very sensitive to a lot of things. If you even asked her, I don't think she would say that she is psychic, so to speak. But she is very in tune, and she definitely has enhanced our investigations with the ones that she's been on with her sensitivity. So,
well, if you bring any, take food to the investigations, because we need it. Okay. So whenever you have a psychic on site, have granola bars. Get some chocolate for the gal or the guy. Believe
right.
A little beef jerky never hurt nobody. Okay.
Pizza. We
I
There you
can
go.
put back a whole pizza after an investigation. I mean, I'll just shovel it in. I don't even care.
But directly after investigation, I got to go for the dark chocolate. It helps with that pineal gland.
Really?
It does. Dark chocolate. Dark chocolate helps. Yep.
I need to.
Professor Lupin from Harry Potter was not kidding. Chocolate helps. So.
Okay, I'll do that. I'll do that.
So I saw the comment down in the chat. You guys want to talk a little bit about your event coming up here, your Paracon on July 20th. I saw that my buddy Rick Hayes is going to be there. So since I'm probably not going to be able to make it, I'm disappointed. I'm going to miss Rick.
Yeah, we're lucky enough to have Rick agree to come in and speak. Andy's going to be doing his own gallery reading towards the end of the event, which you can buy tickets on his website for if you want to actually be a part of a gallery reading with Rick Hayes. I mean, he was, for many years in a row, he's been actually voted as one of the top psychics in America or in the world. But I mean, he's very world renowned, and he is very good at what he does. We're going to have Rick Hayes there. We're going to have other speakers. There's a tour company in Marietta, Ohio, that's going to come up and talk about some of their locations and experiences. Hidden Marietta Tour Company is going to be there. We're going to have Adam Bonnet, who is, of course, he has Glider, and he goes and investigates, and he's a great asset to the Paracon and any Paracon that he speaks at, advocating for those with disabilities and you know, pursuing their goals and living their dreams. And you know, so he's going to be a good one to listen to and to not miss. And then of course we have the Tennessee, two of the Tennessee Wraith Chasers, which you might recognize from the Destination America's Ghost Asylum and Haunted Towns, and then the Travel Channel Haunted Towns and Haunted Live, and who knows what in the world those guys are working on now. I know I see them all over social media talking about they're flying here, flying there, filming this, filming that. So who knows what's next for them. But Doogie, Stephen McDougal, and Mike Gonzalez are going to be there representing the Tennessee Wraith Chasers, and they're going to speak as well. And of course, we're going to have vendors. We're going to have a investigation, of course. If you buy the VIP package, you get the investigation after the convention is over. And of course, Mike and Doogie are going to be there for that. I'm hoping Rick Hayes sticks around to be a part of that. You know, so it's going to be a lot of fun. We're going to do ghost tours throughout the prison in the afternoon. And yeah, it's going to be a great event. And if you are in the area or you have the means to travel, you can get tickets on wvpentours.com, or we will also at the time be selling the normal tickets at the gate. Now, VIP tickets, those are about half sold out already. And the event is still months away. It's July 20th, so they're already half sold out. So if you want to attend the investigation, I recommend going on that website, wvpentours.com, and buying those VIP tickets ASAP.
Yeah, I don't want to speak for him, but knowing Rick, because we've done a few events together, he usually sticks around for a little while for the investigation. So
good.
I would expect it. So he's usually really good about that. So
yeah, I have not actually gotten to experience what Rick picks up whenever he's in there. He says he's been there before, but I wasn't there when he was there in the past. So I'm interested to see when he actually goes into the penitentiary what he picks up on, being that he, you know, is so in tune with the spirit world. And of course, it's going to be a very interesting night of investigating, as well as a very fun day. You know, we have lots of vendors. We made sure we're gonna have food. We have I believe we have a food truck already booked. You know, so there's a lot of food. There's gonna be popcorn, refreshments. It's gonna be, you know, we're gonna have pretty much everything you would need right there. And it's gonna be sponsored by a local restaurant called Huddle House. So yeah, it's gonna be a fun time.
I've been to that Hogle house before.
That's right. It's the only place open in Moundsville.
I know. All right. So how can everybody find you? And then we'll get to the shout outs on everybody and everything, everybody.
How can they find us, Jason?
You can find us and Steve and Dave on YouTube. Find our YouTube channel at Paranormal Quest. You can find us Paranormal Quest on Facebook, Paranormal Quest on Instagram, Twitter. Still, yeah.
Twitter is at PQ Reality.
PQ Reality.
And yeah, we're on almost all the social media platforms. We used to have a Patreon page, but I don't know whether we do or not anymore. To be honest, we didn't really have very many people that went over and decided to become patrons, so we kind of fell off the face of the earth with that. But if you happen to find our Patreon page, we may restart that.
There you go. There you go.
So,
and I did put the link to their YouTube channel down in the description, so you can easily find that one there. And then if you go to the Facebook event, both the YouTube channel and their Facebook page are in the Facebook event. So there's ways to find them for sure. All right, so let's go ahead and, if you guys don't mind, we're going to quickly get to some shout-outs here. First of all, Super Chat Superstars, Dustin Samario, Joe Chandler, Katie Palmer, and Chipper Terry. Thank you all very much for being Super Chat Superstars this evening. And then we'll get to some shout-outs here. Really appreciate everybody down in the chat tonight. There are several of you, absolutely fantastic. So I want to thank Shana for shenanigating the chat this evening. So we have Andrew Cox in the house, Bree Jones, Beat 3 Airspace. Thank you very much, which reminds me, Deep Down the Rabbit Hole, you were talking about Patreon patrons. We have Deep Down the Rabbit Hole Patreon patrons. Tom McNicholas, Beat 3 Airspace, BD Flint, Zippy Davis, Joe Chandler, Dustin Samario, Andrew Cox, Pamela Queen, and David Yaisil. I think I said his name correctly. Shauna will probably correct me later on. We'll see. We have Brandy Starleaper in the house. Burgo King, thank you very much for joining us tonight. Carmen Explorers, thanks for joining us. Kathy Ciliento, thank you as always. Chipper Terry, thank you. Creatrix Corvus Arts, that's Mickey Dole. Thank you once again. Donna Gorton, of course, thank you very much for being with us tonight. There's Dustin Samario and EQ. Thank you once again. Greg Rinkin, thank you as well. Judy Wilson and Katie Palmer, thank you. There's Kelly McCarville. She's in the house. I am going to be at Kelly McCarville's event this coming weekend. Psychic and Paranormal Expo in Dubuque, Iowa. So check that out, you guys. And then there is Leslie Fear. Thank you for joining us tonight. Lily Toomey, thank you as always. And of course, there's Paranormal Quest down there. Tom McNicholas and Tanya Sargisian. And I hope I say your name correctly. If I butcher anybody's name, I do apologize. There's Diane Hilbert, Haunted Road Media's Fairy Queen. Katie Hopkins was in the house as well. And let's see, Rick Gabbert and Robert Hanna. And William Bennett as well. Yeah, see, that participants list is not all-inclusive because there's a lot more people here. Discord Threads, thank you very much. April M. Winnegwans, thank you as well. Nichelle Thompson, thank you as always. There's the Haglin. And I think that is going to about do it. If we forgot anybody, again, apologize. There's a lot of you in the house tonight. And so it's hard to get everybody, but we try. All right. And there's JoJo. All right. Ryan and Jason. I know. After saying all those names, I'm like, man, whew. Whew.
He's gonna pass.
Catch my breath. I am.
Right. You gotta remember to breathe. Man. Get some oxygen.
I know. Whew, whew, whew. All right. Let me get some coffee here. Now I'm good. All right. Ryan and Jason, Paranormal Quest. Thank you guys so much for coming out tonight. Really do appreciate it. We'll have to have you guys back on again here really soon. So
absolutely, we would love to.
Thanks again.
You guys have a great night. Everybody else, stay tuned for Inside the Upside Down. We're going to be talking about paranormal television shows. Hot topic. All right. Coming up next. Till then. The stream is here and you laugh, Vanessa. I'm sure they're getting a kick out of it.
I just got tickled. I'm okay.